Hi, I have to be quiet because it's 3 in the morning. I can't sleep because tomorrow I fly to Thailand. After 20 years of dreaming about retiring and moving to Thailand and dying in Thailand, tomorrow I make it happen. I will get on a plane at the Cedar Rapids Airport and fly to Qatar and then on to Thailand. I've never gone this direction. I've always gone west through Tokyo to Bangkok. And I remember the first time I went in 1988 from Tokyo to Bangkok. Me and this Japanese guy stood in the back of the plane by the bathrooms, chain smoking cigarettes until we had smoked all of his cigarettes and all of my cigarettes. And you could do that in 1988. The seat armrests had ashtrays in them. That is no longer the case, but I'm still going to go. I have to be quiet because my friend Amy is sleeping inside. I'm in her garage, and she's let me stay here for a week. Amy is my high school girlfriend, a woman I fell in love with when I was 15 and she was 13. We are in our 60s now, and I still love her. She's still as beautiful as the day I met her. And she let me stay here for a week before I flew to Thailand, never to come back, as far as I can see. I'm convinced I'll live a year there, and I will be satisfied with that year. But I don't envision myself coming back to the United States. So yeah, I can't sleep. So I'm glad you're here. It was awfully lonely. Um, I've been thinking about a guy I knew in Phuket in the 90s, and I swear to God, this will be the last story I tell about Phuket in the 90s. And because after tomorrow, I'll be telling stories about Thailand now. So I knew this guy. His name was Tristan Jones. Tristan Jones was a very famous author. He had written 17 books about single-handed sailing. He was a yachtsman. He had been paid to deliver boats back and forth across various oceans, and he held records for most crossings of the Atlantic single-handed. He took a boat from the highest navigable water on the planet, Lake Titicaca. Oh no, from the lowest, from the Dead Sea to Lake Titicaca, from the lowest navigable water on the planet to the highest, by pulling the boat on his back through the Mato Grosso swamp. And he, at the end of his life, washed up on Phuket. He was sailing alone around the world in a trimaran, and he had lost one leg to diabetes. And when he got to Phuket, he lost the second leg. And after that, he was no longer fit for ocean sailing. But even so, with no legs, I mean, from the hip down, from the pelvis down, no legs. And he was only 5'5" to begin with. So that little gnome of a guy in a wheelchair took a long-tail boat from Phuket across to Krabi, had an elephant drag the thing across the Kra Peninsula, and then up the Gulf to Bangkok and up to Chiang Mai. And he wrote that adventure in a book called To Venture Further. It was the last book he ever wrote. He begins in Phuket and ends in Chiang Mai. And there was a time when there would not be a cruising yacht anywhere in the world that did not have some of Tristan's books on board. He probably only sold 10,000 books, 10,000 copies of any single book. But they were sold to some of the wealthiest, most influential people in the world. He was very famous in a very small but very wealthy pond. But he was stuck, penniless, at the end of his life, crippled, sick, on Phuket, and friendless. In fact, he was despised because it turned out that probably only half of what he wrote about himself was true. And I want to apologize for what the camera is doing here with the light. It's fluorescent lights in a garage in Iowa, and this is the best I can do. At any rate, Tristan was in bad straits the last 10 years of his life. It was so bad, people were throwing empty beer bottles at him on the road. He would drive his three-wheeled motorcycle with the sidecar around Phuket, and people would pass him and throw beer bottles at him. So he had a sign on the back of his bike that said, I know every cop on the island, and if you throw something at me, I'll have you arrested, which was pure bullshit. He didn't know any Thai cops. He didn't know any Thai people. He didn't speak a word of Thai, had no interest in Thailand or Thai culture. And, but that was Tristan for you. And at the end of his life, he was writing a letter every single day to the postbag section of the Bangkok Post. And if you can imagine, this is, the 1990s. There's no blogs, there's no chat rooms, there's no vlogs. There's the letters to the editor column of The Nation and the Bangkok Post. And the Bangkok Post, by far, was the most influential paper read in the palace. Read by every Falang in Thailand, and by every tourist, and by every foreign educated Thai, going right up to the tippy top. And they printed about 2 or 3 of his letters every week because they knew that Tristan would spark controversy. Tristan picked fights. Tristan was rude. And I asked him once why he wrote so many letters to the Bangkok Post. And he said, well, those are my signal flares. He said, I live alone. I go days without seeing anybody. And my hope is that if the letters stop, somebody at the Bangkok Post will contact somebody on Phuket and someone will come check on me. So these are my signal flares. It kind of reminds me, I just retired from a career I had for 20 years, which was being a low-level clerk for the government in various hospitals, for the Veterans Administration and the U.S. Army. And, I was required to sit at a desk in front of a keyboard and a monitor for 8 hours a day, and they only provided me with 4 hours of work. So I had a lot of free time. So before I discovered Facebook, I would go to Amazon, I would look up every single book that had Thailand in the title, and I would read the sample available, and I would review the book based on the sample, and I would be clear in the review, this is based on the sample, which is usually 10 or 15 pages. But most of these reviews were scathing. Most of the books published about Thailand are crap. Now in the era of self-publishing, every yabo with a word processor and a free weekend can publish a book. Most of it is crap. And I said so, and many times. And sometimes, if I was in a bad mood, if it was a bad day at work, I could be really nasty. Much like Tristan. And I probably put 100 reviews like this over the course of 2006 to 2010. And eventually I got tired of it and stopped. But Tristan was coming from a place of attention seeking. These were signal flares at sea. You imagine a dark sea, dark sky, and suddenly a bright flare goes up. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. I was coming from a place with my book reviews of boredom, just sheer boredom. I had a really boring job for 20 years, and I took it out on amateur authors. Took out my frustration on amateur first-time authors. So I bring this up because the thing that the most striking thing about having this YouTube channel for the past 8 weeks or so is the comments. God, I'm addicted to reading the comments. I read every comment over and over. I respond to every comment. And I know not many people comment on the channel. But I post little links to these onto, the groups on Facebook. Siamese Memories, Bizarre Thailand, Thailand Vloggers with a Z, and Thailand Vlogger Hub, and Phuket Expats, Expats in Phuket, Phuket Expats in Phuket, Phuket Expats. And boy, the comments there are numerous. And the thing I've noticed is that half at least half of the comments are coming from either a place of boredom. Some guy, some expat in Thailand is holed up in his single air-conditioned room up in Yasuton, and he's looking at YouTube all day long and avoiding his Thai family. Or a place of attention seeking, just some lonely, thirsty guy who wants people to pay attention to him. And this is his only outlet. This is the only place he goes. Knowing that makes these guys my brothers. I love you guys. I don't care what your comment is. If you comment on my channel or any of my videos, man, I'd give you a kidney. I am so grateful. So yeah, tomorrow, I hope I haven't woken Amy. I'm speaking kind of loudly for a garage in Iowa at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:19 in the morning. Yeah, tomorrow I fly out, and May 12th, 7 a.m., I arrive in Bangkok. And after that, it's gray void. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I have to find a way to stay there. And we'll see, and I hope you'll come along. I hope you'll keep watching. This will be the last video in the Road to Thailand series. I have no idea what the next series will be called. Hey honey, I'm home. I don't know, but I hope you enjoy it. Listen, I want to close by reading you a poem. Yeah, a poem. You don't want to listen. Thank you for listening this far. Like and subscribe, and tune in a couple weeks or a couple days and see what I'm posting. But for those of you who are interested in language and words and literature, first of all, become members of the Thailand Expat Writers List Facebook group, TEWL, The Tool. It's a great place to find new titles about Thailand, a great place to talk about the books you love, and a great place if you're writing, if you're one of those guys who's self-publishing, even if you're one of those guys that I slagged off in 2006 on Amazon. Check in, the Thailand Expat Writers List. And I want to read you a poem. This is by John Gartland. And it's in his book Airstrip, which I'll put a link, if I can figure out how, I'll put a link in the description. John is the poet laureate of Bangkok and a hell of a nice guy, his politics notwithstanding. And after working for 8 years in an army hospital in El Paso, Texas, I am very comfortable with people whose political opinions don't mesh with my own. You know, we're all the same. So anyway, this is a poem called Weightless. And I've had this, I put this over my desk about a year ago at work as I counted down the days to retirement. So I've read this a couple times a day for a year. You would think I'd have it memorized, but after a year, smoking marijuana every day of my life since I was 15 years old, I don't remember anything. Sorry, Roy. But it's called Weightless, and it speaks to me deeply. And I would like it to be the last thing I post from the United States before I begin posting from Thailand. Weightless by John Gartland. Pat said it was scary, selling everything, the house, the furniture, his records, the whole filing cabinet of his life till now. The lodgers have gone, and he's cashed in a policy or two. Surprising how releasing it can be once you decide to put it down, somehow. To put it all down, Pat's story, Pat history, all you think you own. He's got a quiet excitement here, alone. Skydiver in the freefall door. His rig is clean, his harness is secure, breathing a chill promise of vacant heaven, new life composed before him on Earth's tilting manuscript. I wave, and he is gone. The lonely rush, the poetry of falling, cuts away the nondescript. Weightless by John Gartland. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you in Thailand. Khop kun mak nakrap. I'm going to get used to doing that, don't I?